Good evening. It's now 6 p.m. and the regular session of the Planning Commission of the City of Lancaster will come to order. Tonight, our invocation will be offered by Commissioner Christ, and Commissioner Cook will lead us in the flag salute. So if you please stand.
If you'll bow your heads with me. Lord, thank you for bringing us here together safely. Thank you for all the time and effort that's gone into this meeting, and I pray for wisdom and earnestness as we make decisions tonight, Lord, on how to better the city of Lancaster and how to glorify you the most. In your name, Lord. Amen.
Please join us in the flag salute. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Could we have the roll call, please?
Commissioners Cook, Christ,
Here.
Harvey,
Present.
Molly,
Here.
Tarciano,
Here.
Vice Chair Hall,
Here.
Chairman Bose.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Would normally call from public business from the floor. However, the only folks in the audience tonight are presenters. So, if in fact we do have public come here tonight, they're certainly welcome to speak to us on any agendized item when the item is called. The speakers would be limited to 3 minutes each, and we ask them to fill out a speaker's card for the recording secretary. Our first action item tonight is approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of February 24th, 2014. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll move that we accept the minutes.
I'll second.
Thank you. Please vote.
Motion passes 5-0, 2 abstentions.
Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda tonight, we have before us a presentation on the Lancaster Transit-Oriented Development TOD Zone. Mr. Ludicky?
Yes, Chairman Vos, members of the Commission, Chris Ani, our Assistant Planner, will give a brief introduction, and we'll introduce the speaker for this item.
Great, thank you.
Good evening, Chair Vos and Commissioners. Currently, we have the Architectural and Design Commission reviewing the Transit-Oriented Development document. However, due to the election, the ADC and the Planning Commission will not meet again until May. So right now, we are pleased to have David Sargent and Juan Gomez-Novi here to give us an introduction to the TOD zones. We just ask you hold all your comments and questions to the end of the presentation. David?
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Is this mic working okay?
No.
Turning it on would be the good starting point. How's that? Is that good, or do we need to adjust? Okay. And then in terms of advancing, oh yeah. See? I have one here. Can go ahead. Sorry about this. We thought we were all set.
You're just fortunate I'm not running it. You'd never get it done.
You're not advancing it, are you? We have liftoff. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. I'm David Sargent, Sargent Town Planning in Los Angeles, and very much enjoy working in your community. Prior to this work, we worked with your staff on a conceptual master plan for the Metrolink station area, which was called the Southeast Transit Village Planning Area, which formed a lot of the foundation for this coding work, particularly in the the semi-blank area on the east side of the tracks next to the Metrolink station. The area that is the subject of this work, you can see this. So here's the square. Here's the mile square bounded by I, Division, J, and 10th West. Here comes Lancaster Boulevard. Through there, the cross-hatched shows the downtown specific plan area, which is governed by that document. And this area, the purple shows the downtown specific plan. The hatched shows the properties that face the boulevard. This has been designated the Southwest Transit Village area, Southeast, Northwest, and Northeast. And the zoning that we're talking about encompasses the area outlined in the heavy black line here, which is the area within about a half-mile walking radius from the Metrolink station, and this yellow area was the subject of that Southeast Transit Village plan. The basic idea of this type of zoning is to provide vision and direction for not just the making of the buildings and the uses of the buildings, but also the making of the streets and the other public spaces that hold them together. So you get a complete place, sort of like you're getting such a fantastic version of here on the boulevard with the nice street improvements and then the buildings filling in an organized and fashion in concert with the vision you had for that area. So this is one of the illustrations we did as part of that Southeast Transit Village work, where this is Yucca in its current form with the vacant parcels that are next to the Metrolink here and older buildings previously used for industrial uses. And so looking at how that street can become a more pedestrian-oriented, bicycle-friendly place, and how mix of commercial and residential uses can fill in over time. So just to confirm the purpose of this kind of zoning, we wanted to just quickly go through some of the main ideas that came out of that visioning work for the Southeast Transit Village area. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Just a quick question.
Sure.
The transit-oriented development,
Yes.
this is inside the Southeast Transit Village. This is kind of a nucleus within that area that we worked on prior.
Yes, sir. Only the general plan had envisioned, well, yes. So in terms of, like, there's different levels of sort of transit orientation.
Right.
The station area, which I'm going to show in a moment, is the area right around the station, which is envisioned as fairly intense development of a mixed-use, higher-intensity residential type. But the general plan also identified the fact that the northeast neighborhood here up to the corner of I and Division, and the southeast coming down through the existing neighborhoods down across the park and down to Avenue J, would also be not transit-oriented in the same sense that they're right by the station, but that they have much more walkable streets. They might be developed more intensely over time, so that they would become neighborhoods that make a nice surrounding for your downtown. So you'd have a very comfortable, livable, walkable environment all around your downtown. So folks who chose to live near the downtown would have beautiful environment in which to come and go from the core itself. So part of it's really about getting to and from the train station, and a lot of it's also about getting to and from your downtown center. So there's a range of degrees of change, and a lot of your neighborhoods south of the boulevard are already very nice, and so this would be looking to protect them from development that would damage that character, and also to help them get better and better over time. And then for places like Yucca, south of the boulevard, where there's really not much going on yet, it would be a much bigger change. So the foundation of transit orientation is walkable places, because if you can get people to leave their house without their car, you've got a good chance of them taking transit. Whereas if they pull out of the driveway in the car, you've sort of lost them as far as transit's concerned. And then buildings that are oriented to the streets to make a very comfortable, safe, walkable environment. And not incidentally, that is very good for real estate value as well. Human scale frontages, shop fronts that welcome pedestrians, and residential entries that are comfortable and welcome the visitor. More intensity near the transit. A variety of housing types: rental, ownership, single-family, detached, single-family, attached, small multifamily buildings. Neighborhood compatibility, so that you get the form of new development near existing neighborhoods is compatible, as opposed to maybe not so much. That new neighborhood serving commercial that might come in along some of the larger streets along the edge of J or Sierra Highway, or even Yucca near some of the existing neighborhoods, would be in, and especially on Beach, new commercial would take on the scale and character of housing, so that it could be a commercial use, but it wouldn't be a big boxy thing next to your house. That you would get along the major corridors, you get retail that could get customers from the corridors, the pass-by traffic, but could also be very good places for the neighbors to walk to. That building on the employment base you have in the Southeast Transit Village planning area, you've got a lot. It may look a little rough around the edges, but there's a lot of very successful businesses in there, and so zoning that will allow them to remain and thrive and grow to some extent seemed like a very important thing. Adding some community gathering places within that Southeast Transit Village area, particularly, there's probably need for a new park or two, obviously protecting and preserving the beautiful park you already have in the Southwest. Climate-appropriate architecture with overhangs and shading is emphasized to help protect from wind and sun in the sometimes harsh climate. And then in the existing residential neighborhoods, guidelines for neighborhoods that fit in. We've had quite a few conversations with folks who live in the neighborhoods just south of the boulevard, and so we've included some guidelines about types of fencing, maybe not so much on the chain link, and more on smoother and more residential types of fencing. And then a rich urban landscape. We don't have landscape guidelines in there per se, but the site development guidelines call for landscaped areas along the frontages in most cases. And also we've suggested the possibility of urban agriculture as sort of a transitional use. Well, it could be done in people's front yards in some cases, and also we'll show you quickly that we've suggested that be available as an interim use, particularly in the underdeveloped areas like the Southeast Transit Village planning area, where you may have some open lots for a very long time as new development comes in, and if some of those were developed on an interim basis as agricultural, urban scale agricultural operations in between new development rather than just vacant lots, we thought that could add value a number of ways. So the changes that are proposed to your existing zoning, one, in the general plan, this is the existing boundary. This is a very small thing, but we're going to disclose it because it's changing. So the existing boundary of the Transit Village planning area in your general plan is bounded with the red, and we're suggesting that it just be changed basically to just pick up that corner and to move over a little bit more there to catch the whole neighborhood. And it's replacing existing zones. The existing zones on the east side of the tracks are one mixed-use zone that your staff had made, which is a very good start on the zoning we're going to show you tonight. And we're showing you sort of a more differentiated type of mixed-use zoning. And then you've got existing residential and commercial zones here, and they're proposed to be replaced by 6 new zones. One is the station area, which is the sort of the most typical transit-oriented development piece right close to the station. Then corridor commercial, which runs along the big corridors, especially Sierra J and I. An employment commercial district focused on office and very light industrial type uses. We'll show you those in a sec. A workshop district which protects the businesses that are already located in that southeast corner there so they can continue to operate and thrive as they are already doing. And then a medium-density residential zone to protect the character of the neighborhoods, this neighborhood, and to protect the character and quality of this neighborhood. And then the neighborhood low is basically single-family with a tweak to protect the character and quality of those existing established neighborhoods. So the TOD zones would replace that pink zoning entirely. In this area, the main change that's proposed is that there would be, you've got a mixture, that's an existing single-family neighborhood, but there's some of it's already got multifamily zoning on it. And so in order to, nobody's really built apartment buildings yet, thank goodness. So what we're proposing here is a form of zoning that would allow somebody to put up to 3 dwellings on the lot if those dwellings look and feel like houses. You could have a main house at the front, you could have like a granny flat at the back, and up to 1 more in between, but with some very precise standards for the scale and size of the buildings so that you could get what is a lot of builders actually are pursuing, there's all different names for it, but it's essentially a multi-generation house where you could have multiple households living within one lot. So that's one small change. Then in this area here already has different densities of zoning allowed on it, and this zoning leaves those densities in place, but it adds criteria for the scale and character of the buildings so that you can have up to, 30? You can have up to the 30 to the acre, but you can't build it in the form of like a big apartment complex. It would have to be smaller scale buildings that fit in with the neighborhood. I'll show you an example of those in a sec. Yes? Up to 30. That's what your existing zoning allows. There's nothing magic about that number. It probably wouldn't want to be higher. But there's an important well, I'll come to that in a sec. But essentially the key there is that it's not an unqualified 30 to the acre. It's 30 if they're on the smaller end of unit sizes. But you couldn't come in there and do like 30 3 or 4 bedroom apartments. They just wouldn't fit. It would be too big and it would ruin the scale of the neighborhood. So you can get up to 30 per acre. But so if you had like a half-acre lot and you did a beautifully designed building that fit in with the neighborhood and had smaller units, then you could get up to 30. But you can't just build 30 in a box. So that's what, and then right now along Beach, you have a little bit of a hodgepodge of commercial and multifamily and single family. And what we're suggesting there is a zone that regularizes the types of buildings that you can build to be like small apartment buildings or duplexes or quadplexes, but also allows that you could have a business on the ground floor of them if it's in a building that's very compatible with what's around it. That we've had quite a few conversations with folks that have property along on Beach there, and the concerns that we've heard have never been about use. It's been about the fact that some great big, not terribly beautiful building is across the street from my house. So the standards and guidelines we've put in here are focused on making sure that whether it's single family, whether it's multifamily, or whether there's a business in the ground floor of it, it's a building that is of a scale and character that fits in. So essentially it ends up being sort of conditionally allowing higher densities and conditionally allowing commercial uses, and the condition is that they're in a building that looks great and is in scale with the neighborhood. And then, well, that's really just the same thing. And then along these two edges of the neighborhood, along Sierra Highway and along Avenue J, right now you've got this really thin little strip of commercial zoning, and that takes the form of some little commercial buildings with parking lots. That takes the form of some of the old houses where they just sort of pave the front yard and you pull in and park where you can. What we're suggesting is a very gently cleaned up version of that zoning with some requirements for the building design. And we're suggesting that that zoning be allowed to come one or two lots in here so that some of these, so that there's the possibility, not the requirement, but the possibility that if the person who lived in a house that was right next to that existing commercial wanted to sell their property to somebody who wanted to develop a nicer commercial property that had a proper sort of buffering arrangement to the next house, that would be possible. And you could get lots that were big enough you could have the parking and the building on that lot without all the parking just sort of being people parking where the old front lawn used to be. So we've organized it into these 6 zones, and I'll go quickly through what each of those zones is envisioned to do. So the station area zone envisions buildings up to 5 stories and densities up to 54 units to the acre. Again, that density, you couldn't hit that density with any huge size of units, but if you can fit within that building volume that's defined and with the parking ratios that are available, if you can get up to 54, that's fine. Mixed use, including office, residential, and retail. No front setback required if you have a shop front on a sidewalk, or you can set it back. You need to set it back some if the ground floor is residential, so you have a small yard. And here's just an illustration of the general sort of character. So it's really a lot like Lancaster Boulevard in that way, only that it would be built from scratch rather than on a street where you already had a lot of one-story buildings. So they might come in initially with multi-story buildings with ground floor shop fronts that might look something like that. And, well, we showed you that before. The idea is that you'd have big, strong buildings. They don't need to fit in with a neighborhood because it's just not a neighborhood, so they can be larger, boxier, more urban buildings like you'd see in a small downtown. Here's just an illustration we did of how if the station at some point involves an entry point on the west side of the tracks and an entry point in a new square on the east side of the tracks, this area could have very, very good access to the station, whereas at the moment they'd have to go up around Lancaster Boulevard, which is not the end of the world, but at some point the hope is that you could have a station that could be entered from either from the Southeast Transit Village side or the downtown. And here's just an illustration of what that square might look like with a station and then multifamily and mixed-use buildings around it. The commercial corridor zone is pretty simple. It's just along I, Sierra, and J. And the idea is that because the lots are shallow, you're not going to have parking lots or parking structures behind the buildings. Most of the lots are only like 100 feet deep, 150 maybe. So what you're going to get more often is a pattern where you have a building with a shop front that faces the street, and then its parking lot is beside it, not behind it. So it's essentially a sort of a cleaned up commercial strip pattern. You would be allowed to, although we're not thinking lots of people would, have upper floor residential uses. If somebody wanted to come in there and do a mixed-use building that had apartments over a shop, that's completely allowed. Might be something like that. And this is an illustration we made of, well, this was up on Avenue I. Not exactly the same piece, but the same kind of situation where you're taking the standards provide that for a taming of the street and filling in with buildings that face the street. Here's another example that we did on West 10th of the kind of neighborhood-serving commercial that could be just down the street from your house. So right around the corner here would start to be housing, and you'd be able to walk out to the larger street and find commercial services there. The employment commercial zone is organized as a buffer between the TOD, between the station area and the existing industrial, and the envisioned character of that is up to 3 stories. A lot of it we think would probably be 1 or 2 based on how much parking people would want to have, but no harm in allowing 3 if somebody wanted to do that. And the parking could be, this is an illustration. Look, this is Yucca, and here's the railroad tracks and Sierra Highway. These lots on the west side of Yucca are very, very deep. There's a huge amount of space there. And so you could get significant building intensity here with just surface parking behind it. Those large fields of parking are quite a resource that we think could lead to a revitalization of that piece of Yucca that goes from Lancaster Boulevard up to Avenue I. And the envisioned change to the street is taking the big wide street that's there now and turning it to angled parking with narrowed intersections to get crossings safe and convenient. The workforce district is what we're calling it. Basically, it's just the remaining light industrial, and we're really not proposing anything at all radical for that, just simple standards. If people want to do new buildings, there could be quite a variety of options, anything from metal buildings similar to what's there now to concrete block buildings or plaster buildings. Just very simple, don't price it out of the market. Just let people do nice little simple buildings. And when it comes to the street, we're not proposing to rebuild it. We're suggesting a strategy where you can just make improvements to it over time so that people park along the edges. You get a few trees in there, and it gradually becomes a more attractive place. The neighborhood medium is these are the areas that are already zoned multifamily, but would allow, without this kind of zoning, the possibility that somebody comes in and does sort of, big beige 4-story boxes that would really perhaps not be very welcome in amongst the houses and the existing smaller buildings that are there. So the focus of this zoning in those areas is to provide scale and massing requirements for the new buildings so that they can have multiple families living in them, but they've got to fit in. So here is I'm sorry, this lighting isn't going to let you see this terribly closely, but the idea is, hello. So here, this is better. So you say what you have out there now is an area where most of the buildings are houses. So the question is, so what does multifamily look like here? So here's an example. That if somebody purchased 3 lots, this isn't any particular corner, it's just a generic place. So if somebody bought 3 houses that were already zoned to this multifamily, what could they do? Well, one of the primary recommendations is the courtyard housing type, which would allow a lot of parking to be brought in off the alley behind and would provide a courtyard in the center here so that rather than this being some big box of a thing, it would be a building wing and then a garden and then a building wing, so that it has a lot of the same scale and rhythm of the old house, then a sort of big house, garden, big house. It's an apartment complex, but it's not a big beige box to the street. Nor is it a ground floor of parked cars with a gate, and then you climb the stairs to go up and find the apartments up above. Then in the neighborhood low zone, that's just basic. That's the place of houses, and it would allow buildings like this that have 2 or 3 dwellings. But as far as the street's concerned, when you're going by, it's still a house. So, and the standards are made so that. And in this case, for instance, if somebody wanted to buy 2 lots that had a house on them, they could come in and build like a quadplex, which would look just like a big house that happened to have 4 dwellings in it. But again, it's not going to be like an apartment block. It's got the look and feel and the front yard, etc., of a larger house. It just happens to have 4 households living in it. You've already got quite a few properties in this area with multiple households already living in them, by the way. And then there's a lot of attention paid in the guidelines to how front fences and yards and walls are made, with the possibility of a fence with landscaping, a possibility of even some limited food production, or the possibility also of just keeping the good old lawns like you have. Although with the drought, that's maybe getting a little harder. So then, I'm just going to quickly go through the mechanics of the zones without going into any detail about how they work, but each zone has a diagram that describes the portions of the lot that the building can sit on. Because this is a stationary zone, it's showing that it can basically go over the whole lot, or it certainly can come all up on the front of the lot. Then it's showing a building profile of where you could have balconies and how many floors and what uses are allowed on each floor. Then it's showing which portions of the frontage you should build the building on, and it's saying if you've got a corner lot, you at least need to put your building at the corner. You don't park on the corner and then put your building somewhere else. This is showing where you're allowed to put projections out, like arcades or something. Here it's showing that the parking needs to be toward the back of the lot, not at the front of the lot. And so the building types that we've described that are to populate these areas are very simple. In the past, we've described them more elaborately or with more detail, and we think we've got this one pretty right. We think it's enough detail to steer people toward really good buildings, but not so much it's going to drive them crazy. So this is just a basic mixed-use building type that can be up to 5 stories with commercial at the ground and other uses above. Here's an apartment building, which has ground floor as well as all the other floors, residential, and has requirements here for the... these tables here, by the way, describe which of the 6 zones each of these building types belongs in. And you will notice, for instance, the mixed-use building does not belong in either of the neighborhood zones. It doesn't belong in the neighborhood high, and it doesn't belong in the neighborhood low. It belongs in the station area or along the corridors, or even in the employment district, but not in the neighborhoods. The same goes for this large apartment building. It can go in any of those other zones, but not in the neighborhoods. The courtyard building does not go in the industrial, and it does not go in the neighborhood low, but it does go in the station area, and it does go in the neighborhood high, like I showed you, where it can go in and mimic houses while supporting multifamily use. This is row houses, which can take many forms. Well, one example is the housing that has been built already just on the north side of Milling. The big new building between Ehrlich and the next one. So it's basically a row, it's attached single-family housing, basically a row of front doors without side yards between the buildings. And then you've got basically the house type, which here we've defined as being either a single family or a duplex. Essentially, it's a house, and it can have 1 or 2 or even 3 households in it for this design right. And we've designed and we've identified another type, again, thinking about the Southeast Transit Village planning area as sort of a long-term project that you want to maybe jumpstart. So we've included the shipping container building type, which has been used pretty successfully in a lot of what's being called tactical urbanism, where it's just it's like, how do we get a start here? It's like, there's nothing out here. Nobody wants to come build a whole new building, but maybe somebody wanted to set up a coffee shop right near the Metrolink station, even while there wasn't much of anything else around it. So the possibility of coming in with an interestingly designed shipping container or a pre-manufactured little building as a way to get a start. Actually, the coffee shop, the Liner Coffee Shop in front of Beck's, is not pre-manufactured, but it almost could be. It would be that same kind of thing. The little, what's that, bandstand? It's Bandstand Coffee, right? It's right over at the corner of Ehrlich and the Boulevard, and it's basically just a little box that was set down there so that you'd have shops along that frontage, and you can do the same thing with in other forms. And then we define frontage types. It's just defining how the entry to the building works, whether it's a front yard or something else. In this case, this could be a gallery where you have a shaded sidewalk, or you could have shop fronts. Then you could have a range of residential frontage types, small front yards or porches. Essentially, it's just the seam between the sidewalk and the building, and that edge defines so much of the character of the place. So we've got a series of suggestions there. And we've included sign types that are calibrated to the frontage types. So when you're in this walkable area right around the station, you could have it's suggesting the types of signage that you have on the boulevard. And then if you get into in some areas, especially along the corridors, you could even have some small signs along the roof, on the roofs, that could catch your eye if you're on the larger corridors. And finally, we've got a series of recommendations for ways of remaking the streets so they're more walkable and bikeable and slow the cars down. This is a recommendation for Avenue I, where this could just go ahead. This could, for a long time, this could just be your left turn lane, but at some point, portions of it could be medians. Show ways of getting bike lanes in on Division Street. This is the idea about Yucca to get the angled parking. And rather than creating finite street designs at this point, some of these may not be implemented for many years, depending on financing, etc. But we've included here essentially a kit of parts for adding angled parking, adding new tree planters, adding different sorts of frontage improvements that your public works staff can use as sort of a conceptual framework for making the streets more pedestrian-oriented over time. So that's all I'm going to present. There's a little more, but I don't want to go on and on. I'd like to answer any questions you may have or clarify anything that hasn't been
All right, thank you for your
sufficiently clear.
presentation.
Sure.
We've had the opportunity for a preview
Yes.
that staff provided us last week of a link to, excuse me, ma'am, excuse me, ma'am. We have a procedure here, and let me explain it to you. We talk, you listen, and this is how it works. You were late, so if you wish to make comments, we will call on you. Until then, please be quiet. Thank you. Excuse me.
Yes.
As I was saying, we've had a preview of this, and we've had the opportunity to review the link to it.
Great.
Certainly very extensive, and we appreciate all the work. Could you share for us, just briefly, the interest groups you've touched on this?
Oh, yeah. Well, in the process of working on the Southeast Transit Village planning area, we met repeatedly with quite a number of the property owners and business owners in that area, including a number of people that own businesses along Sierra Highway. In that stretch, some of the folks that own the auto parts store are among our most faithful participants. They've probably been to, 8 meetings or so. We had workshops over in one of the churches on Lancaster Boulevard and had quite a significant turnout of folks from those neighborhoods. The churches were very generous in offering the possibility of reaching out through their networks to folks who live in the area. We've met several times with Architectural and Design Review Committee folks. I think what other constituents? It was advertised quite broadly.
Yes, we had several people who were residents, and in fact, in one case, a business owner on the boulevard. He and his wife actually also live down on Beach, so they were involved. We've had residents from the South Downtown area that have been a part of it, and I recall as part of the, at least the Southeast Transit vision plan, we had transit writers who were present and had their comments on what it was.
And of course, the folks from MetroLink and Metro.
And I would add, too, that we not only were fortunate enough to have people from the faith-based community offer facilities, but we actually had participation from several of one pastor, I believe, was at least several of the committee meetings.
Right.
And of course, this Public Works planning staff
Oh, yes.
involved, certainly.
Yes, they're on us all the time. I mean, yes, we've shared drafts of stuff with them. We work closely with them in the Southeast, in the concept plan for the Southeast, and they've been reviewing the standards that we've been suggesting here. And on the street side, we've actually set them up not so much to be standards in a hard way, but rather illustrative of a way of approaching the streets, so that as they have funding and bandwidth.
Very good. Thank you. Some of us had the opportunity to give input in the past and attend some of the workshops as well. So
Yes.
I, for one, certainly appreciate your efforts. Some of the members may have questions, and go ahead if you do, whomever may. Mr. Traciano, do you?
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm ready to put together.
We're ready to see it grow out of the ground, right?
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else?
Thank you for your presentation and all your hard work. It is an exciting project, and it's good to see it starting to move forward.
Thank you. You're more than welcome. It's entirely our pleasure.
And I got the pleasure of sitting in on one of the outreach
Yes.
workshops you had at the church, and it was a nice turnout. Good to see people in the community get involved.
We were very, very happy that. That's why we like to have them in places like that. If you have them all at City Hall, it's just different. But if you can go,
True.
if you can go to spots in the neighborhood where people are used to coming and feel comfortable, you get a whole nother level of participation.
Thank you. Let's talk about process for just a minute, Mr. Ludicky. We're asked to give input but actually there will be a public hearing process on this before ADC and also this commission?
Correct. The Architectural and Design Planning Commission actually still has these in their purview. They are in the process of reviewing the overall document. We expect that they will probably take some kind of action as far as a recommendation at their May meeting. They cannot have an April meeting because the chambers are not available for their normal meeting. So I'm anticipating that they will have had sufficient time, and by their meeting date in May, which should be the first Thursday in May, they'll be prepared. They're looking at it strictly from the design aspect of it. Once it comes to you as a planning commission, you are actually looking at it from a couple of legal standpoints. As David indicated, there is a general plan amendment, which is the amendment of the Transit Village boundary that you will have to take a look at. And there's also the aspect of the regulatory parts of this form-based code, as it's called, and that would constitute a zone change. So you will be in the position as a planning commission of holding however many public hearings you feel comfortable in terms of getting input, making your own comments back, and at some point when you're comfortable, you will act as an advisory agency and make a recommendation to the City Council on the both the general plan aspect and the zoning regulation. Once you complete that, then it will be in the hands of the City Council and they will make the final decision.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions from anyone? So, do we have any speakers on this matter?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Before you announce the speaker, I will read into the record so the speaker understands our procedures here. Any person who would like to address the commission on any agendized item is requested to complete a speaker's card for the recording secretary, identifying the agenda item that you would like to discuss. Each person will be given the opportunity to address the Planning Commission at the time such items are discussed by the Commission. The speaker's cards are at the rear of the chamber, and the speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. So, if we have a speaker, please announce it.
Maria Paisano.
Ms. Paisano,
Hi,
welcome.
I only have 3 minutes now. I came in earlier because it wasn't on the agenda, wasn't up on the site to be able to look at it. And also, last week I came in for the architectural design meeting that was supposed to be, but I guess they didn't show up and I was the only one here, so they didn't have one. As far as this goes, I don't know what we think we're doing here with all of this. You know, you hear words like, could be, look, maybe, might, possibility. I mean, these things can be changed around at any time. They can just, it's not even, it's like a virtual reality, like life or something. I don't understand what you guys are doing with all of this other than getting your way on things that you want. Like, as you can see, I have a stack of things and that I wanted to talk about. But now that I have 3 minutes, it's kind of rough to do that. But this is ridiculous. It's really sad at the state of things here and where we're headed and what we're doing. I mean, what happened to truth? What happened to just telling things like it is? I don't know why we have to go through all of this. I've been coming in here and coming to the city council meetings, calling up people, trying to get people to listen to some things or help with some things, but there isn't help with it because people are more interested in the money aspect of it. And it's a pretty sad thing. And like I said, to come up here and have 3 minutes, the only thing I can think of to say in 3 minutes is that what we're doing to each other is just I didn't know I was have to come to this point by the time I get here, And to come up here and have to stand here and be like this. Knowing that it's just, one lie after the other. And that no one has care and concern for anyone anymore unless it deals with money or deals with power or deals with, what they're going to get out of it. And now, now that the developer...
Ms. Paisano, your time is up. Thank you for your comments. All right, anything further from anyone?
Yeah, anyone?
You may-
Can I have a question?
Ma'am, you may
I
sit
can
down.
maybe
Your time is
elaborate a
up.
little more. Somebody can ask.
Excuse me, your time is up.
Anybody have a question?
Your time is up. Please sit down.
Yes, sit down. Sure.
All right. Anyone else have any comments or questions? No other speakers?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you.
And you can go home early. Understand there's a celebration going on the boulevard tonight since it's St. Patrick's Day. I've heard that.
And we heard some of that. There's a very lively 3-person band over there that involves bagpipes and a big drum. Yes, pretty nice.
Well, I didn't know about that. Maybe we'll join that later on. I don't know.
They were doing the rounds in Bex.
All right, thank you.
I brought my beads.
All right, new business. The next item of business is regulation of carnivals and other similar uses. Mr. Ludicky?
Yes, Chun Ing will give this report.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, Chairman Bose and Commissioners. Staff is requesting direction from the Planning Commission to investigate the regulation of carnivals and other similar uses, and to provide a recommendation to remove and or to amend the use from the Lancaster Zoning Code. This is a result of public health, safety, and welfare concerns. The investigation may include, but is not limited to, incidents of crime, traffic, circulation concerns, and other operational impacts of these types of uses. If directed, a staff report with resolution, ordinance, and findings will be presented to you at a future date and with a recommendation to the City Council. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments from the members? Do you have any speakers on this matter?
I have no cards, Mr.
All
Chairman.
right, thank you. So, would you define carnivals and other similar uses? The other similar uses, I guess, is what I'd like to hear about.
Well, I think that's part of the research is defining what carnival means. So I think that is certainly up to your discretion as to how staff should proceed with the research, including the definition of carnivals and other uses. In other words, we don't have the answer at this point. There may be a definition, there may be an existing definition in zoning code, but I don't have that right now. So.
Would this be for like streets of Lancaster would be considered another use, or the Poppy Festival?
I think all of that is up for discussion at your direction.
The Boulevard?
Well, I suppose so. The Antelope Valley Fair and Alfalfa Festival has what I would consider carnivals during their 9 or 11-day run, don't they, Mr. Molly? Usually, what is it, 9 days or 11 days or whatever? 10 days. 10 days. You consider that a carnival, certainly. What about the neighborhood church activities that typically have?
I think that
Two-day events?
that's going to merit some investigation. There are carnivals, there are traveling circuses, there are events which happen that contain aspects of those same types of things, and I think that we're going to have to define what we mean by a carnival or a circus, and try to determine whether there are situations where that's kind of an accessory use to a main use, school carnival or something of that type. And even I think we're going to have to take a look at the issue of seasonal sales, for instance, pumpkins, Christmas trees, which may have rides or other types of entertainment that are associated with them. So
Some of those
it's not, I don't think it's as clean and simple as we would probably like it, which seems to be the case with a lot of things.
And then the operations, its location, the land use elements, whether it's a public or private enterprise, profit or non-profit. Would we potentially get that?
Yeah, how that would affect the land use aspects of it, I don't know. But I noticed that our our assistant city attorney is rapidly writing, which I think is a good sign in this case.
The purpose of the regulation of carnival and other uses, what would be that? What would be the purpose?
I think there have been some concerns expressed about what types of locations they go. I don't know yet at this point whether that's something that perhaps is addressed by locational types of issues. We certainly in the past, I know, have had concerns expressed from neighbors. In some cases, if the site that's used is largely undeveloped, there are sometimes issues with dust control or other things, parking access, noise, hours of operation, if they're allowed in any manner. I think all of those particular parts of the operation probably need to be explored in that regard.
What about air shows? Would that be considered a carnival or an event?
I'm not going to comment on that at all, actually.
Well, for my share, I think it fits into a broad entertainment venue is really what we're talking about, that would attract hundreds or thousands of folks from either locally or out of the area.
Certainly has that
and
potential.
Alfalfa Festival attracts tens of thousands of folks from out of the area.
That is true.
If you look up the definition of carnival, it's a festival. It's an instance of where people gather. It's a very broad definition. Carnival, when you look it up in the dictionary.
So is there any law enforcement issues that are of a concern as well?
I think historically there have been at times, depending on operators. Generally, they're pretty well policed by fire safety personnel. They tend to be pretty much on top of that. But I think you've hit on an interesting issue. Do you look at an outright ban? Do you look at eliminating them from certain zones? Or do you establish certain operating conditions that attempt to address the concerns or the problems? And I think any one of those approaches or a combination of them may be appropriate, but it's going to require some investigation on our part and certainly some fairly careful legal evaluation, because you really... When you're starting to look at uses, correct me if I'm wrong here, you really have to kind of look at type and effect. For example, I know that one of the issues that we had at one point was that we had a code that prohibited churches in a certain zone but allowed lodges to like elks or something, and the concern was, how do they really operate in any different manner, so to speak? So those are the aspects of things that we need to look at also on it.
Would the regulation affect only the festivals, say, using our air show as an example? If that draws 50 to 100,000 people out there, that's going to tax city services, law enforcement, traffic direction, stuff like that. So this wouldn't be just that spot. It would have to be kind of more of an overarching thing. It would have to be addressed in making that festival or air show work. The fair must have to do stuff like that too, because I've seen the freeway backed up with traffic getting off.
Well, the 4th of July, for example, at the fairgrounds. We've all experienced those opportunities. And there's the reason I brought up the churches. I mean, there's some church facilities here in our community that have had long-standing entertainment venues, whether they be for entertainment or profit or both, through the years. What about bingo? Is that in the carnival arena? Could be, huh?
Yes, I suppose it could have that aspect to it. One other thing I would add, and I think we'll probably have to take a look at this in light of how we draft the regulations. The city does have a procedure known as a special event permit that it will use for kind of one-time issues. Chris, I know you've been involved in several of those at times, but use of a facility or something like that where we think there may be additional needs for law enforcement or some kind of other control, where we've gone through the special event process to kind of address and vet those issues out.
So currently is there a procedure or ordinance, I guess, that would allow the city then to, besides the regulation, to assess the user in advance of potential costs as it would relate to law enforcement or fire service or whatever else, whatever other services that might be necessary to crowd control of those things?
Yeah, I know that we have done, in situations where we think there may be an issue of if there's parking on unimproved surfaces, for example, we have required in advance bonding or other guarantees that if the and deposits such that if the promoter doesn't deal with the issue after the event is over in terms of cleaning or other sorts of approaches, that the city has the resources to get that accomplished. So yes, we have done that, and we have assessed at times the need for those types of additional cost services, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that would be an important element to make sure that that's properly vetted, that's for sure. That public safety is, first, last, and everything in between, right? Well, if we have any more thoughts on the matter, then we'll communicate with you directly on it and let you.
Yes, myself or actually Ms. Corbett will be the person doing a lot of the research and chat, given the task of trying to pull together a draft of some kind of ordinance in this regard.
Well, since this is not an action item per se, we've mentioned our concerns individually. So is that sufficient to give you folks direction?
Yes, I think that would be at this point.
All right, very good. Thank you.
What would be the next thing that we would expect back? we start this process where we push the ball off the hill and it rolls, are we going to get like a presentation on transit oriented like we had tonight? Will it be something similar, or?
I don't think ours will be as well developed as the one you saw previously. However, what we would intend to do is return to you with a draft of the ordinance, kind of be able to highlight for you what staff has put together and the things that are of concern. And then I think we would look to set up a process to send that out for a public review process, because I know there are probably, well, there's at least one that I know of, Carnival operator provider, that is going to want a chance to look and provide some comment back on that. And
So as a local business, I don't know if it's in the city limits, but there certainly is a local Carnival business here.
yes.
Is staff a little overwhelmed right now on, Mr. Lukey, is staff got a lot of stuff on their plate?
If I can speak on it.
There's a lot of different things that we're dealing with at the moment.
Excuse me, we're going to take a brief recess.
And it's not too long. I can't just wait again and again and again, Well, you asked me to give you the card. You said you would take it over there.
session. Any further comments on the carnival issue?
Yes,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman.
Go ahead.
Going back to process, in a little bit of a discussion with the Assistant City Attorney, I think she has a very good suggestion on this, and I'll let her relay that to you.
Thank you. Rather than coming back with a draft ordinance for your consideration, it might make more sense for us to come back and give an interim report after various research and discussions with interested parties to give you some options about what the ordinance might look like, and then you can give us additional direction and we can proceed from there.
It makes sense to me. Everyone agree? Lots of stakeholders, churches, and lots of those. So, all right, very good. Well, we'll hear back in a couple of months probably, or maybe next month, depending on your workload. Thank you. All right, anything? Are we done with that issue? All right. The next item on our agenda is a discussion of temporary signs and banners. And staff, Mr. Lukey, you have provided us with an extensive overview and report, which we appreciate. Anyone have any comments before we listen to Mr. Ludicky? Anyone? All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Vos and members of the Commission. To reiterate, this is the result of direction that was given to staff and the Planning Commission at the January 28th City Council meeting. I did go back and re-listen to the video, audio of that meeting, or that portion of the meeting again this morning, and the direction is to take a look at creating a sensible sign and banner ordinance, however sensible is defined, and the comment was made that, you know, these banners, I guess there were a couple that were up, including that one, seem to be nicely done, and maybe we've got some more opportunities available to us. That was pretty much the wording. What I did in preparing you this memorandum was to try to highlight the main issues in looking at a set of regulations that would deal with temporary promotional signs and banners. In some cases where staff feels there are certain directions that we think would be appropriate to go, that was indicated. But the intent of this particular time in the meeting was really to allow the Commission to provide direction, much as you did in the previous item. And in thinking about it, I think maybe we should take the same approach on this, where once we get an idea of where the Commission members may be, if you're willing to provide that input this evening, we would come back and give you a status report again prior to the preparation of the actual draft ordinance. But once again, this is going to require some research from a legal standpoint. Signs, of course, you know, I've had a number of court cases over history that define what you can and can't do, and certainly there are stakeholders involved in this that are going to want the opportunity before you get to a public hearing stage on them, where they're going to want the opportunity to review what's being proposed and give their input back on it. So with that, I will give it back to the Commission. I guess the first thing that you would need to determine is whether you're comfortable at this point having this discussion, or if you want additional time or there's additional research that you feel you could benefit from, and we would try to help you in those regards also. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ludicky. Does anyone have anything to add? No?
I, for one, saw the plethora of documents that we have to go through, ground-mounted, swoop banners, teardrop, all this stuff, and I, for one, would like a little more time before I directed staff.
Anyone else? Pardon?
I said I agree with Vance.
All right. You know, in the past, when we've had the issues of, this is a relatively narrow review as opposed to the entire sign regulations as it relates to each individual zoning, right? That's what we, if I
Yes.
understand the
Yes,
parameters.
correct.
So I, for one, want to understand the definition and see some, live examples. And we don't have that yet, so maybe we should take a month or till the next meeting at least and have an opportunity to take a look around our community and other communities as it relates to these temporary signs, banners, or streamers, whatever you want to call them. Unless someone objects, why don't we do that then? You good with that, Mr. Ludicky?
I'm perfectly okay with that, and I would add that if you happen to be out, and I think everyone has a camera or a phone with a camera now, perhaps some photographs of things that you think, maybe good, or things that you think are things we need to address, I think would be helpful also to both legal counsel and staff in trying to figure out directions on this.
All right, very good.
But the only other thing I would add is this, and this is why legal counsel is so important. While we've tried to keep it to temporary promotional banners, there is a consistency issue that, we have temporary sign regulations. We're going to have to see how this works in with that also, so that we don't get into a situation of...
And those are defined by zone, by each individual zone?
The city's code right now, I think, defines sign regulations by zone. It doesn't have a separate sign ordinance that comes into play.
All right. All right, very good.
Should we email the pictures to Joy?
Yes, that would be fine.
Thank you.
All right, very good. Yeah, it's as we've discussed on other occasions, the communication among commissioners, we can't do that. We have to communicate to staff, and if staff chooses to share it with us, that's fine. However, our communication has to be through staff, not to each other, right? Okay.
That is correct.
I'm sure we're all clear on that. It just never hurts to remind ourselves. All right, then. Is there anything further that we should be discussing tonight? Sorry, I lost my place on the agenda. I beg your pardon. Director's announcements, Mr. Ludicky?
My only announcement is, for those of you who are attending the Planning Commissioners Academy, League of California Cities, if you haven't already made contact with Joy, please do so.
Some of us have, and all of us will. Right, Ms. Reyes? She's great on giving briefings and keeping us on the straight and narrow, so. All right, then. Commission agenda, anything from anyone? Nope. All right, then. There is no public here for public business from the floor, but if there was public here, they could have an opportunity to speak to us on any matter they wanted to talk about for 3 minutes. But since there's none here, we'll move to adjournment. So this meeting is adjourned to our special meeting for agenda review Monday, April 7th at 5:30 p.m. In the Planning Conference Room here at City Hall. Thank you all.